morning. With Mark Barber again for our second shot at this morning. Mark, interesting discussion. Again, as usual, we start on one thing and through some of my offbeat thoughts, kind of get you off the track. But we ended up really with a good discussion of discipleship. However, that may have got there. Where are we at right now?
Well, we're going to pick up with the boat ride, so going over to the other side.
Okay.
Now, I went to was at Knox. Haddon Robinson, one of my preaching professors, connected the discipleship to this little boat ride here, and then to the following section. Of course, I think he was using the Gospel of Mark, but nevertheless, it's there is a connection here, and I think that what we have to look at is here. He says, "This is what a disciple says: I will follow you wherever you go." And we brought this up. You brought it up in the beginning of sometime in that last discussion. This is what discipleship looks like. Now, we have to remember the Jewish people were not seafaring people. The idea is that they were people of the hills. And frankly, they were kind of afraid of storms and rain. Now, who was the great storm god in the Old Testament? The one with the lightning bolt in his hand.
Oh, Zeus?
Well, Zeus too. Well, Zeus, but no, Zeus wasn't. That wasn't. Well, yes, it is. The funny thing is, you're right. It is Zeus. It just is by the name of Baal.
Okay.
Okay. They're all interconnected. There was a lot more interconnection, but Baal, it was the ones. Was the Lord of the rain and the thunderbolt. Of course, yes, true. Zeus, Jupiter, or however else you want to, call him, is the one that controlled the storms. Now that's part of, remember Elijah on Mount Carmel. He challenged their God to deliver on what their God was supposed to be able to do. What had it not happened for 3 years?
No rain.
So whose God was failing? They had failed God because they wanted to worship Baal, because Baal promised them fertility and rain and fields, and as long as they went through the rites and did what they were supposed to do, that Baal was obligated to make the fields. And God took away Baal's power. Part of the idea of there's not going to rain till my word, and Elijah is talking. My word is the Lord's word. And then he comes to Mount Carmel, the God who answers by what? Fire. Let him be fire. And they cut themselves because and expecting lightning and storm. And all of a sudden they do all day long. And Elijah takes a few minutes, redresses the altar, puts the bullock on, and then asks in a drought, put water on it. More water. And then the fire, the lightning from God came down. And it says, Elijah, the Lord, He is God, which, by the way, is the name Elijah. Some of them might have been shouting in the crowd, Elijah, rather than Eliah. The Lord is my God, or Yahweh is my God. But that's neither here nor there. So we have the idea is that it's a competition is to who is the Lord of the storm, and who is Lord of all. And whose God is God? Is God the common conception of fresh-baked cookies and warm milk? Or is he the God of the storm, the one that both creates the storm and the one that calms the storm?
I think both.
Well, all right, well.
I know what you're saying, but he's the God of all comfort. In some areas,
I understand.
Yeah. No, I don't.
But the comfort is a covenantal idea of that, not just something that you go through the rites and the rituals. Yeah. And people at church go through rites and rituals because they think my cat's got a ritual with me. When he wants his treats, he starts scratching on the door. When he starts scratching on the door, I know he's done getting petted. He has done his thing. He's submitted to his morning rub down. And now he wants his treats. And I know this. I know that he knows, Because all of a sudden we get still starts looking at that doorpost, and I says, "Okay, I'm going to get this God of mine to do my bidding. All I have to do is scratch that, start scratching, and the treats come out." He's got me he's got me Pavlov conditioned. And I'm going to say that that's sometimes the idea towards God. We say the right prayers, we do the right thing, and God does his thing because he's kind of obligated to us. But getting this, that's another side, an interesting side. I don't want to get too far down that road today, but it is, you could get that from this text.
I'm not saying a word. I'm stopping right there.
But it says here, and when they were entered into the ship, his disciples, remember that's that famous word, his disciples followed him. Mm-hmm. And behold, there arose a great tempest in the sea, so much that the ship was covered in water, but he was asleep. And his disciples came to him and woke him and said, Lord, save us, for we are perishing. And he says unto them, why are you so afraid, you faithless ones? And he arose, he rebuked the winds and the sea, and there was a great calm. But the men marveled, saying, what kind of man is this, that even the winds and the sea obey him? Mm-hmm. Well, there is a Jonah trail in the book of Matthew as well. We'll get to it a little later in Matthew 16, where Simon is addressed as Simon, son of Jonah, Simon Bar Jonah. And that'll be a very important part of my Gentile exposition. So I'm just going to give you a little forward advertising for Matthew 16, which you might get to in about a year at the rate we're going. But here it is. The Jews were definitely afraid of water. Water represented chaos. And part of the chaos is because where did invaders come? Invaders came, by sea and by land. The Philistines were sea people, and they came and invaded the coast back in Old Testament times. Just one of, then the Romans kind of invaded by land and by sea. The Greeks kind of invaded by land and by sea. So there were people of the hills and the valleys. They knew the backsides of the desert, and the whole idea of being confronted with all this is was mind-boggling. And all of a sudden they enter into this lake. They're fishermen. They've probably seen a storm or two, but I had the idea this one was outdoing them all. And this wasn't the only storm, but this was one terrible storm.
Listen, this actually has. I'm not the Greek scholar. You'd probably know more about this, but isn't this like a seismatic, almost like an earthquake type thing that throws forth all the waves? I mean, this is not just. I mean, and I would think that even from a supernatural standpoint, this could even be something demonic. It doesn't say that, but I'm just saying there seems to be this huge. This isn't your typical even. This is even larger, right?
Well, the question is who's the source of the storm?
Yeah.
And whether the devil was the source of the storm. The devil couldn't be the source of the storm unless God.
No,
God allowed him to do it, of course.
Right, I understand that.
So ultimately, the ultimate cause
of
the storm is the Lord had something to teach.
Well, yeah, but and I want to just I don't want to go too far, taking you off your path. But I mean, even when we talk about that, this represented chaos and things, but all the way through the Old Testament, I mean, there's almost this sense where Jesus is. I mean, this really is when they say that. I've kind of probably stopped you, and maybe I don't mean to get there too quick, but in the Old Testament, I mean, God was a God who commanded the elements. I mean, he commanded all of the elements to Pharaoh. He's the one that split the Red Sea. The Bible in Psalm 18 it talks about he rebukes the waters or the sea or the ocean, and it's
he makes a storm and he calms the storm.
Yeah, and so then we have another one that says that the what does it say? The stormy winds fulfilling His word. So so we have God to control the elements. I'm sorry. So that's
it's ultimately speaking. This is a very great demonstration of the sovereignty of God. We can argue over over whether the devil is the intermediate cause or not. That's not. I'm not.
Uh-huh.
I don't think that's what's interesting. There's a great storm. It says with wind.
Right.
We like to say everything has a natural cause, and God uses natural causes too.
Right.
And anytime you have the miraculous enters into the world,
Right.
there has to be some sort of scientific, evidence to what God is doing. I mean, I saw the word said, the Red Sea parted, and there, you have to say, well, how did God do it? And you could look at, and it's certainly miraculous. But at the same time, one would see could see it scientifically to some degree how God did it. But God is still the master of all the elements, and either whether it's in the normal order of things, and even in when we see chaos. Now, if you were asked, the Lord came to you and said, let's cross the ocean and I want you to speak to the Ayatollah. I want you to speak to al-Baghdadi in ISIS about Jesus. Or just to know, even people that aren't so noteworthy, just the average common followers. That would represent a sense of chaos, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I'd be thinking if I'm talking to him, I'm packing some serious weapons.
Well, the trouble is that But I'm saying, what would a Jew think about getting into a boat and crossing over into the Gentile country? It's almost like, man, I don't even want to go to California anymore. The people over there are strange.
Yeah.
Of course, they probably think we're strange and deplorable too, but that's neither here nor there. I find that I would not want to go to Berkeley and amongst that crowd there.
Yeah.
But that crowd there needs Jesus more than anybody.
Yeah.
So we have the idea. This is what a discipleship is. I'm going to follow you wherever you're going to go. Well, if you're going to be a disciple of Jesus, you're going to follow him here. They're not even there yet. This is maybe sometimes kind of like what's coming, and all of a sudden and even that becomes a complete disturbance to the way you live. But it's very closely tied. This is the next step. You're going out here to get this storm, and you have the idea of chaos and appear in the depth. Lacu profundus, out of the depths I cry. In other words, it's the idea of the sea or the lake. They call it sea, but it's really for the Middle East it's a large lake, but it's not really by our standards. Lake Chickamauga, a lot bigger lake. But the idea of being out.
Yeah, I'm from Michigan, and so we were surrounded by the Great Lakes. Now those are.
Yeah, well, and I can still remember songs like the Sinking of the Ella Fitzgerald by Gordon Lightfoot and others.
Hey, to be honest with you, I was just thinking about that when we talk about this storm. I was up on Lake Superior. Of course, that's where the Fitzgerald was sunk, is up in the Lake Superior. And I will tell you, I was actually when I was a young man, I was preaching up in the Upper Peninsula, way up north, and I can't remember where I was at. I'll think of it in a few minutes. But one of the men of the church, after this, and it was storming out in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. I mean, way up. Says, hey, he was a logging guy, jumped in his big old four-wheeler, and he goes, you got to see this. So we go all the way up to Lake Superior, and to be honest with you, I was like, dear Lord, we're never going to get out of here, because it was a storm, and so anyway, we got up there and watching Lake Superior, the storm, the huge waves and the storm. I will tell you that it was magnificently beautiful. It was an awesome thing, but if I would have been on that, I would have been terrified.
In the boat.
It
says one thing to be the scribe there.
Yeah.
It's another thing to be in that boat.
Right.
It's exciting to watch on television. It may be more exciting because you actually felt the wind a little bit, and a little more sensory adapt. Of course, with HD TV, you can get almost immersed into a storm on TV, but. The whole idea is the storm and chaos. The idea of the Gentile world represented chaos, moral chaos. I mean, that was another form of chaos, is the absolute lostness of people. We see moral chaos around us. We see the disintegration of all kinds of morality.
Oh, yeah.
And it causes us great indigestion and fear. And here I'm saying this is a physical event. I'm not trying to say this is an allegory thing, but sometimes you have historical events can speak beyond themselves and can be treated as though in the storms of discipleship. How do you talk to Jesus about Jesus in all this chaos? These people are odd.
They're not even they're not even thinking about him, to be honest with you. I mean, at the very end, they're, hey, wake him up because we're gonna die.
Yeah, and but what is Jesus doing?
Sleeping.
He does. God does not. Nor does he sleep, is one of the hymns. I've heard the bells on Christmas Day by Longfellow. God is not dead, nor does he sleep.
Yeah.
Sometimes to us, it seems God be a little bit unconcerned about the troubles we're going through. It's not because he's unconcerned, because he's in charge. And and one thing about calmness under fire, I mean, you can sleep through a storm like that. And it demonstrated to the disciples, look, the disciples can't perish when Jesus is in the boat. They can't perish when Jesus is in the boat because Jesus is not going to die on that boat. Now, there'll become a time of chaos around the crucifixion. That's true.
Yeah.
But what you see right here, as long as Jesus is in the boat, nothing can happen because it's not his time. And but
I gotta tell you, I don't think, looking at that, I don't think I'd have acted any different. I'm
not saying we.
No, I'm just saying that. When Jesus stands up and he rebukes them, he's rebuking me because I'm thinking the same. I mean, first of all, he's down there, and maybe that's right. And I will tell you, kind of in hindsight, we see that. Okay, we know the end of the story in terms of Jesus. They're living through this, and the storm is there. I'm not saying that they shouldn't have been, but when Jesus speaks to them, I think he's speaking to all humanity, because at that point I'm thinking, wow.
I'm not. I certainly agree with you. I just love the Greek term allegoi pistoi. That's
what does that mean? I have
little faith.
Okay, yeah.
Oligarchy, little. Pistos is faith, a little faith.
So little, not no faith, but some faith.
Well, but Jesus is kind of also saying, we take these storms as being personal, existential things in our life. We don't tie it to the discipleship thing much. We talk, oh man, I'm having my marriage is really rocky, and I need someone to calm the storms in my life. My boss is really breathing. But those are just things of the common chaos, the common things of life. What we are seeing here is the direct result of discipleship. How many times you've heard a person says, well, I got arthritis and that's my cross to bear.
Yeah.
Or, diabetes in my case, that's my cross. So people who aren't Christians, they have diabetes. And they have arthritis, and they're living in this terrible soup we're living in. In fact, they're living in this soup without any hope. They're just trying to bail the water out of their lives faster than it comes in. That's what the disciples are reduced to a point where they're acting like anybody else does in a panic situation. But this is tied to discipleship. And bearing your cross is the persecution and the pain and the suffering you get for following Jesus Christ. As we went back to that second example in that last passage, it talks about, let me bury my father. Other words, my father doesn't approve. I will suffer persecution. I will be disowned. I will be disinherited. I will have all types of terrible things happen to me if I openly declare that I will follow you, Jesus. And he says, and Jesus says, that's exactly right. You will suffer persecution, and you will suffer all these things but you will also receive lands and brothers. And he's talking about the fact you'll have a new family. He's not talking about you're gonna have some persecution, but you're gonna have this big spread. You're gonna live on top of Beverly Hills Mansion. No, it says you're gonna lose a family. but you're going to gain a greater family. And that's, so if you get disowned, you get disowned. So all of this is represented the idea of discipleship. This is the first step, and I think this, that's what it's bringing up. It's leaving the crowd, leaving the comfort of the crowd, leaving the comfort of your people, and leaving where he says, "Man, I can have a real good ministry here," and say, "Leave it all behind."
But there's also, I mean, I guess I should ask you before I get into this. Are we going to finish this story where Jesus comes up and speaks to the storm?
Yeah, we're about to.
Okay, good.
No,
I don't want to jump ahead here because I have some questions on that. I'd like to.
All right. Well, then, and afterwards it says he rebukes the storm, and that word, rebuke is one of those words that's again of various interpretations. From just giving command to giving to saying to what we would call a rebuke. I don't know. Rebuke may not be the best translation of the word, but basically he gave commandment to it.
Stop.
He said over. And it says everything became smooth. So in the Elijah story, God shows himself as God, as the one who answers by fire and who brings the storm. In this case, he's the one that calms the storm and shows himself to be God.
Yeah.
It says, "What manner of man is this that even the winds and the sea obey him?" Oh man, you can climate change, anybody? The idea is that we can't even control the weather. Chinese are trying very hard. They get it rain on their country and not on ours, and there'll be global wars. If it were up to people, it says I
think God settled that fact way back with the covenant He gave to Noah. Said, I'm not the earth will never be cursed for man's sake again. Animals, nothing.
But He's going to bring the storm of fire.
Yeah,
He's going to bring fire. He says that's what this. The elements are going to melt with fervent heat.
Yeah,
that's there. I mean. So, what was a great question you wanted to bring up?
Well, no, it wasn't so much a question as you just answered it. I mean, ultimately, this is a demonstration and for lack of a better word, a proof that Jesus is God. Because, like they just said, "Hey, who is this?" Even the weather, even the elements, respond to Him and obey Him. And the only one that could do that is God Himself. And like you said, I had really, to be honest with you, during all the time, I had never really connected it back to Elijah, but I had connected it back to Moses and in Egypt and the Red Sea and and even where God told Moses to strike the rock and water poured out.
Yes.
There's a total control over all the elements, and and David, there's that combination. I think it's in in 2 Samuel somewhere where he basically Psalm 18 is repeated in 2 Samuel.
Yeah.
There's this place where it says that God is the one who speaks to the sea and lays bare the elements.
I used Elijah not because that's the only.
No, I certainly
God caused great hailstones to fall.
I just think that there's amazing how God, that all the way through here, including Elijah, and probably we could probably go through. It's probably just amazing that here he is, and we think of of course the resurrection, which is the ultimate proof. But I mean, all these things, all the way going through, there are testimonies and proof of who Jesus is and His absolute sovereign control over all creation.
All right, now for the little bit of thought. This is the afterthought. The winds and the sea know who their master is. The ox knows his master, and that's from Isaiah, the first chapter.
Yeah.
And and the donkey is master's crib. But my people do not know, nor do they consider. An evil people laden, filled with iniquity. Here it is. God commands the winds and the sea.
Yeah.
And they obey. God commands us, and we put conditions.
Yeah.
That really says something, doesn't it?
Yeah. I'm kind of going back a little bit here, but we talk about it's interesting that the world, that when you turn your eyes away from God the Creator to other gods or to other methods, whatever it may be, you end up ultimately fearing chaos.
Mm-hmm.
You turn to God, and God is not the God of chaos. God's a God of peace. I mean, He peacefully makes the earth. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. There's this, and immediately there's a peace, and there is a order. He orders the division between water and land. And it's all peacefully. There's no chaos at all, and it's all for man's blessing. And here, God just shows that there's no chaos. God's in control of everything.
Well, originally, there's also the idea of the restoration of chaos to order in the end of all times. That's the ultimate purpose and trajectory of the Scripture. Is the idea is that
sin introduces chaos. God.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. God.
Yeah, there was no chaos until sin came in.
That's right, and God interacts with that chaos.
Yeah.
But if you understand what the Bible theology is, this is biblical theology: creation, fall, redemption, restoration. And here you have a sense that God is, there's eschatological restoration at the end. Is that all this will be rebuked?
Yep.
And not only will the winds and the seas obey Him, but every knee shall bow.
Yeah.
Every tongue shall confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. That's, there's the promise of this restoration here in this text also.
Yeah.
And when you read, all your biblical scriptures have to be read in this greater context of God's plan from creation to restoration.
Yeah. Well, just one last thought, and we'll have to go because I've got another meeting just in a few minutes. But the interesting thing here is that just on the scene, I'd like to maybe we'll pursue next week of this idea of chaos and restoration things, because God is not even today we've got people that want to preserve pristine wilderness, and in Scripture God doesn't really like pristine wilderness. In fact, He allows evil people to inhabit land so that the pristine wilderness doesn't take over everything. He sees man, even evil people, in some ways is better. I mean, until his people come. I mean, and then the land vomits out the evil people, but they're replaced immediately by people. But God allows even evil people to inhabit what would be called the desert areas,
the wastelands. Will be an interesting discussion for another day. But leave it with the songs, the Peace in the Valley. The God of the mountains is the God of the valleys, or Psalm 121, I will look unto the hills,
from whence
cometh my help.
Absolutely.
Whether that's a question or a exclamation is up to debate, but nevertheless.
Mark, great debate here. I enjoyed it. We'll talk to you next week.
Okay.